everybody, hope you're doing well. This week's video is about a series that I haven't talked about on this channel, but it's one of my favorites. We're going to be talking about The Last of Us, more specifically, the upcoming Season 2 of The Last of Us, and why I think we need to be a little concerned about it. Now obviously, this video contains spoilers for The Last of Us, as well as The Last of Us TV show and The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us Season 2 is pretty much right around the corner. As I stated, I'm a big fan of this series. I bought a PlayStation 4 to play The Last of Us Part 2, and I ended up buying the original Last of Us and played through both of them back to back. I've even beaten both games, as well as the DLC for the first game, on the grounded difficulty, or for the DLC, the highest difficulty it goes to is Survivor, but on both games I took the time to beat it on grounded mode, which is no easy feat. I also 100%ed the DLC, so I feel like I have a good grasp on the Last of Us series, and so I say it as a fan when I say I'm concerned about Season 2, but I think to fully understand why I think that, we have to go back and discuss Season 1. Season 1 of The Last of Us, which released on HBO, did a fantastic job of visually bringing the world of The Last of Us to life. The special effects, the music, even down to the environments themselves were all outstanding. Particularly the use of practical effects on most of the shots with the infected. That's something that I, as a film nerd, really appreciate. I know I mentioned that in my Minecraft movie video, but I am a film nerd and I do appreciate physical, practical effects, even if CGI is used as well. I remember when the casting was still sort of up in the air. Nobody knew who would be playing Joel and who would be playing Ellie. And when the casting finally came out, that being Pedro Pascal as Joel and Bella Ramsey as Ellie, a lot of people were divided. There was a bit of, I guess, backlash, if you want to call it that. You had these toxic fans who were upset that Tommy and Joel were played by Hispanics, and some fans hated Bella Ramsey as Ellie because she was too ugly to play the character, which, they're playing a child. Why are you worried if your child character is attractive enough? Overall, there was a lot of vitriolic, unwarranted hate on the cast of this show, even before the show itself came out. Other people did have genuine concerns about the show, fans of the games who wanted it to be done well. These fans were worried more particularly about the performances that we would be getting from these actors. And that's not to say that Bella Ramsey or Pedro Pascal are bad actors by any means. They are both very, very talented. In particular, I remember seeing a clip of Bella Ramsey on Game of Thrones. Now, I never watched Game of Thrones, but when I was doing research, I was like, okay, who's this person playing Ellie? I looked into them, and I really liked their performance. They did a great job in Game of Thrones from the scenes I saw. So that's what convinced me early on. But when you think about Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker, who played Ellie and Joel in the original, they're amazing in both the first and second games. And that's why I was a little concerned. And I remember thinking before the casting came out that I just want the best actor available because they need to bring their own performance, their own element to these characters, instead of trying to imitate Ashley Johnson and Troy Baker. It really feels impossible to live up to those two and their performances in the first and second game. But I was cautiously optimistic about it overall, and I was very happy with it when it released. I especially liked the decision to have the storyline follow the same A and B from the video games, but a lot of the stuff in the middle was very, very different. A good example would be even in the second episode, trying to get to the capital to meet with the Fireflies. The A and B is pretty much the same. They go there, Tess dies in the capital once they find basically everything all screwed up, and then Joel and Ellie leave. However, the middle is very different. They're not just one-to-one copying scenes, and that's something I really like. I did have some problems with the show, mainly just its pacing. The game has the advantage of being long, and you basically spend all of your time with Joel and Ellie. You really connect with these characters. You spend all this uninterrupted time with them, and you get to see the little differences in their interactions and what happens if you explore explore this part of the map. You just get to know these characters in a very, very close, intimate way through the video game. The show, however, is shorter and splits its time among different characters occasionally. And when you consider that they spent an entire episode without Joel and Ellie pretty much, not that the episode with Bill isn't great, it's a very well done and very emotional, very well written episode. However, it is a big detour from the main show. We hardly get any Joel and Ellie. And even with the Left Behind episode, we hardly get any Joel. Now, granted, I understand it's similar to how they do it in the game, except it's a separate DLC. But I think when we consider the change in medium from video game to TV show, some of that sort of connection is lost in translation. Some of those intimate moments that we only get in a video game are kind of lost. And the show then has to help us connect with these characters in a different way. And I think they, for the most part, successfully do it. I just think that some of the scheduling with this show could have benefited from a little work. It ended up feeling like in a lot of sections that we were being told to care about Joel and Ellie, rather than being shown why we should. For example, when Ellie sort of gets kind of quiet and depressed after everything that happens, I can't remember his name, but with the really creepy guy and Troy Baker plays his like sidekick, that's his little cameo. I remember thinking that it felt a lot more jarring when Ellie was cold to Joel, even though it's paced very similarly to the game, and I think that is just one of the drawbacks of doing a TV show. So overall, I did enjoy the series. I don't think it's perfect by any means, but I thought it was a great adaptation of the source material. So now we're gonna get a little into Season 2/Part 2, and why I'm not as optimistic this time around. The Last of Us Part 2 once again was attacked by those same toxic fans that I mentioned in the beginning, and also just received a lot of general hate for the direction it went. With Joel dying, the introduction of Abby, having to play as Abby for a long section, as well as having a transgender character at the forefront of the game, and being far more mature in terms of its violence as well as its sexual content, this drove a lot of fans. It kind of rubbed them the wrong way, and it also gave more fuel to those insane toxic fans. These toxic fans ended up going after the actors and actresses involved with the game. Primarily Abby's actress, Laura Bailey, because of her actions as a fictional character, and also for the fact that her character has a different build. Abby's obviously very muscular. Having a not-so-traditional feminine build, they were hurling homophobic and transphobic slurs at her and sending her death threats to her personal Instagram, things like that. Just insane things. People are dumb. And another thing that got a lot of hate that I can agree with to an extent is the fabrication of shots in the trailer. Oh, but Marvel does it, but other movie companies do it. I don't like it when they do it either. I think it's disingenuous. But I also don't think it is enough to make me riot. I just didn't really like that decision, you know what I mean? It felt like Naughty Dog's decision to put in a clip of Joel in the trailer didn't feel very genuine. It felt like, hey, we need to lean into that, hey, Joel and Ellie back in the saddle to get people to buy this game and then pull the rug out from underneath them. I'm not saying Joel shouldn't have died or anything like that. I just think that decision to do that with the trailer is something I personally disagree with. So, with all of the controversy surrounding Part 2, you can understand the beginning of my concern for Season 2, and especially how HBO, how Naughty Dog, how the writers are going to handle it going forward, because they don't want a repeat of actors and actresses getting hate. They don't want them to get these death threats, things like that. However, they need to be true to the game. There were plenty of rumors about HBO completely ditching the plot of Part 2, keeping Joel alive, and also the question of who will play Abby became a big topic of debate, both out of concern that she's portrayed well, and that the actress, was going to have to deal with a lot publicly. There were going to be a lot of people coming after her, the same toxic fans from before, and new fans just of the show because of her character's actions. One of the biggest fan casts was Shannon Barry, who I really think should have played Abby. I think she's a wonderful actress, and I think That would have been my personal choice if I was a casting director. Now maybe her audition wasn't great because they didn't end up going that route, but that is me personally what I would have gone with. But in the end, Caitlin Dever was cast to play Abby. And she is a great actress. I've seen her in a lot of things. She's in a great comedy called Booksmart. She is in a very serious show on Netflix called Unbelievable, I believe it's called. That is a very, very dark, very serious show that I only recommend if you are in a good headspace. It is a tough watch. But she is a fantastic, both dramatic actress as well as comedic actress. And she was actually up for the role of Ellie for a time when The Last of Us was just going to be a movie and she was younger. I do, however, I have a little trouble with her playing Abby. Once again, not to completely go back on what I said, I think she's a great actress. However, one of the things is that Abby is kind of jacked. Now, that may seem unimportant to most people. However, I feel that it is a very, very easy way to show who Abby is as a person. When we see her in a flashback, she has a more typical build. However, in the future, when we see her, she is very well built. This is to show, in the game at least, visually her obsession with Joel and her obsession with becoming strong enough to never let something like her father's death happen ever again. There's plenty of bits of evidence throughout the WLF headquarters, her room, that show that her obsession with becoming strong enough to never let anything like that happen again, to protect the people she cares about, took over her life, and that is why she's built the way she is. Even in the flashbacks with Owen at the aquarium, this alludes to it. She doesn't want to relax. She doesn't want to let her guard down. She is instead thinking about how they can find the man who killed her father. And this is where I get into my concern with the show, as well as the decisions that are going to be made in terms of the story, in terms of the emotional beats, and that kind of stuff, because I feel that this casting decision didn't really come from a place of, we need the best actress available, that it instead came from a place of fear because they didn't want to deal with backlash, that they instead wanted the show to do huge numbers just like season 1 did, rather than deal with some of the conflict that they would have had to if they had gone closer to the game. Because having a non-conventional looking woman in that role is a big decision, and it was part of the reason she had hate, as well as killing off a beloved character. But it feels like they are pandering to these sexist crybabies who you've never, the same people who were mad that Aloy had a beard on Twitter, like these kinds of incels who have never seen a woman up close, you know what I mean? Now, obviously, once again, best actor available, but the reason I don't think that is the genuine reason they went this route is because of a quote from Neil Druckmann himself. In an interview, he said, Abby was meant to play more like Joel, and that she's almost a brute and she can physically manhandle things. That doesn't play as big of a role in this version of the story because there's not as much violent action moment to moment. It's more about the drama. And not only does that undercut the entire point, really, of Abby's physique, but also a huge emotional and thematic part of The Last of Us Part 2. He also went on to confirm that Caitlin went through no training for the role, which it confirmed in my mind that they wanted someone who was conventionally good looking to play Abby, and that was a conscious choice, especially when you have Bella Ramsey working out and training to portray a more lean, more athletic version of Ellie because she's supposed to be older. Now, obviously, I do not expect any actor to put on insane amounts of muscle in a short time just for a role, or to physically change their bodies for a role. I think that that's something that is, in terms of your health, irresponsible, and I think later on we're going to see negative health effects of doing that. For example, Tom Hanks, wonderful actor, from his fluctuating weight between roles, he has diabetes now. But I think someone who is Isaac's top scar killer should at least look the part. I just think, in terms of Abby specifically, it's very disappointing that we're losing this piece of visual storytelling and this very important side of her, the obsession, the drive to turn herself into a weapon, to be able to finally feel safe, to finally feel secure that she can protect her friends, that she can get vengeance for her father. We're losing a big chunk of that. And when I say that they're undercutting a major thematic part of Part 2, him saying specifically that this is more about the drama, there's less violent action. One of the reasons that The Last of Us Part 2 got some backlash from more general audiences was because of the sheer amount of violence. The game is very graphic in its violence. They've programmed it where enemies beg for their life. They call out to each other. They say each other's names. If I sneak kill some guy, someone over there will say, "Hey, where's Bob?" They walk over, they see him dead on the ground, and they go, "Oh my God, that's Bob!" Things like that are meant to make you feel bad for being violent, for killing all these innocent people in the name of revenge, for Joel or for Abby's part. That is the major point of the game, is that the cycle of violence, the cycle of revenge is wrong. And while that is a very basic theme, it's what the point of the second game is, and it's why the violence is so integral to the story. And they try to make it feel so personal. And so then to say that, no, this is about the drama. This is about the drama. It's not about the violence. It's not about the action. I feel like this is the time to lean into the action. The scenes that we didn't necessarily get in Part 1. But they're leaning away from what I think is a strength of The Last of Us Part 2, which is the violence, the sort of depressing atmosphere, the guilt, the need for revenge. It feels like they're just leaning away from that. What, is it just going to be Bella Ramsey having a debate with a WLF member about, hey, you killed our people, oh, but I killed your people? No, you have to show it. You have to make the audience really feel something. And visually, that's one of the best ways to do it. All of that to say, these changes and the seeming motivation behind it, the fear behind it, that they want to avoid backlash, they want to make this more accessible than the video game, makes me concerned about what else they're going to change. Would they go as far as to remove characters like Lev or Lev and Yara's story because, oh, it doesn't fit into the drama? Or, what? Are they going to also alter Dina and Ellie's relationship? It just, obviously, that is hyperbolic because we've seen some stuff in the trailer of Dina and Ellie. However, my concern is that because of these changes that I feel are so integral to the second game and to the story it's trying to tell, that when you remove these things for the wrong reasons, it's going to feel hollow. And once again, to really hit home why it feels hollow, is just a few days ago, Season 3 of The Last of Us was announced. Which, that combined with reviews I've read saying that this is only half the story. This is only the first chunk of the game. It really, at the end of the day, proves to me that a lot of these decisions are just business decisions. It's more profitable to release 2 seasons of a TV show. You get to hype it up twice. You get to advertise for it twice. Get people interested. Buy merchandise. Buy subscriptions for HBO. You can't just get a free trial, watch the whole season of The Last of Us 2, and then move on. No, they have to keep coming back. This also reinforces the pacing issues that were already present in Season 1 of the show. I can't imagine how it's going to be in Season 2/3. I think if you want to avoid fan outcry, the thing you don't do is end on a cliffhanger where, hey, Abby is going to take over for the entire 3rd season, and we're not going to see Ellie or Joel or these people. It truly baffles me because I like the dramatic choice of having Abby take over the narrative of the game. I like the dramatic choice of having Abby take over the second half of the season. But I think you need to do that all at once, week by week, rather than splitting it into 2 different seasons. At the end of the day, what I mean to say here is just that Season 2 and 3 now of The Last of Us has me concerned. I feel that some of the dramatic decisions that they're going to make are hollow, that they aren't from a genuine place trying to create a good piece of art. And it worries me because I'm a huge fan of this series. And if this video does well, or if you want to see more Last of Us content, please subscribe and leave a comment below because I do plan on doing cut content of both The Last of Us Part 1 and Part 2. So what do you guys think? Are you concerned about Season 2? And hey, I could be very, very wrong. It could come out and it could be the greatest piece of TV ever, and I will swallow my pride and say something about it. but I think my worries are pretty well founded. So let me know what you guys think, and thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you, so have a good morning or evening or, whatever. Bow, bow, bow.